All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the new college football playoff format is here, and it really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, nor should anyone be surprised that this runaway freight train that is college football continues to pick up speed. The 5+7 model, which guarantees the inclusion of the five highest ranked conference champions and the next seven highest ranked teams that are going to participate in the playoff. Like I said last year, this 12-team format will not be perfect, and it's only a matter of time before people start complaining. And the 5+7 model will be in place after the 6+6 model was pushed aside after the destruction of the Pac 12 conference. Now, with this 5+7, in favor of the 6+6, or as opposed to the 6+6. Washington State and Oregon State, no, anybody else, they really should not be surprised. I mean, you look at the Pac 12 right now, it's basically Washington State and Oregon State. And the writing on the wall is that there's going to be a merger between Oregon State, Washington State, and the Mountain West, with the Pac 2, if you will, inheriting everyone from the Mountain West. And I guarantee you that the powers that be are not going to view that league as a power conference. Nonetheless, the Pac 12 could still have a shot to get into this playoff format. Maybe not the shot that they were expecting to have a couple of years ago, but nonetheless, a shot nonetheless. So there's a lot of things that have to be, unpacked on this thing. One thing I want to talk about, it's the Notre Dame factor. And where will the Fighting Irish fit into this equation? And will this force Notre Dame to join a conference? You look at it like this, okay? It says the top five highest ranked conference champions. Well, right now, Notre Dame is still a football independent, and they're trying to hold on to that. And it's one of those where what happens now if Notre Dame goes 12-0 in the season? They're not going to get a top four seed, which means they're not going to get a first round bye. I guarantee you, if that were to be the case, okay, there's going to be some talking among the Notre Dame people. There's also going to be talking like for the people not affiliated with Notre Dame, and now theoretically Notre Dame would then have to go out there and play an additional game in order to be a conference champion. I've said it before and I've said it again about Notre Dame. They want to have their cake and eat it too, because if you remember when the independents started to join conferences a little bit more than 30 years ago, remember that group of independents was a powerful one. You're talking about Florida State, Miami, West Virginia, Pitt, Notre Dame, okay, Penn State, just to name a few. And of course, we saw all of these teams or schools rather join conferences. Now, from there, Notre Dame decided to affiliate themselves with the Big East with every sport except football. And of course, the Big East kept clamoring for Notre Dame to join the conference. They never did. And subsequently, the Big East, football wise, folded. Now, Notre Dame then took its ball and went to the ACC, and it was the same deal. We're going to join your conference in everything except football. But in the 2020 COVID year, we did see Notre Dame join the ACC. And because of that, they were able to get themselves a spot in the college football playoff, in spite of the fact that after going undefeated during the regular season, they lose to Clemson in the ACC championship game. I've said this before, and I'm not the only one who's going to say it. And other people have said it too. It's a fact. The allure for Notre Dame is not what it once was. You think about it. When Notre Dame got that NBC contract many years ago, okay, they were one of the few shows in town because you figure you had the Notre Dame game, their home game coming on 2:30 Eastern on NBC. All right. You got one game on CBS, maybe two games. And the same could be said for ABC. This was a long time ago. So in those days, it was really all about the marquee teams. It was all about your Texases, your Oklahomas, your Notre Dames, your Penn States, your Miamis, your USCs, your Ohio States, the big boys at the table. That's no longer the case because everybody is on TV now. So now Notre Dame really can't sit up there and say, hey, you know what? We got this sweet NBC deal. Come play for us because you look at the Big Ten. The Big Ten, they got to deal with CBS. They've got to deal with Fox and they've got to deal with NBC. And whereas they're going to show the Notre Dame game in the afternoon or maybe that evening slot, now Notre Dame has to share their NBC window with the Big Ten. And I think subsequently, we kept talking about it as far as what is going to force Notre Dame's hand to join a conference. I think this might be it. Again, the independent room is not as strong as it once was because everybody that is somebody has joined a conference. And I really think this could be what pushes Notre Dame over that edge, and they're going to have no choice but to join the conference. I think the other piece to this puzzle it's also going to boil down to what their next television deal looks like. I'm sure that the folks there are probably going to look for a streaming package as well as a television deal, trying to see any way possible to sweeten the pot. But nonetheless, this could be it as far as forcing Notre Dame to join a league. On top of that, what's in store for the group of five? Because we've seen it with the recent, 14 format. We did see a group of five team you know, get to the college football playoff a couple of years back in Cincinnati. And of course, that ruffled some feathers. But you know what? The Bearcats were undefeated and they deserve to be there. The group of five is still going to have a possibility because, again, it's the top five highest ranked conference champions. And you figure you got a power four with the ACC, the SEC, the Big 12, and the Big 10. The Pac 2, if you will, takes a step back. And, you're still going to have the MAC there, the Mountain West, for now, the American Conference USA and the Sun Belt. So one of those schools, one of those teams from one of those schools is definitely going to get in. And I think it's one of those where we're talking about the group of five, but honestly, I want to make this the group of seven. And the reason why I want to make it the group of seven, because no disrespect to anyone with what I'm about to say, but for this matter, I do feel that the Big 12 and the ACC are in the same boat with these guys. And the reason why is this just like the part of the title in the parentheses, just like I've talked about in the past, it's the Big 10 and the SEC against everybody else. Because you look at it, the Big 10 and SEC have basically merged, if you will, to take all of the heavyweights of the sport together as far as getting them from other power leagues. We've seen the Big Ten go out there, get Nebraska. All right. They brought in, and of course, Nebraska hasn't been the powerhouse in football like they once were, but you figure what they just got from the Pac 12, USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. Then with what the SEC has done, Oklahoma and Texas. Of course, before that, they brought in A&M and Missouri, not to mention the heavyweights that they have there. And like I said before, when the powers that be decided to get this to a 12-team format, you got a 16-team SEC, you have an 18-team Big Ten. Only one of those teams can win the conference in those respective leagues. Only two of those teams are going to get to their respective conference championship game. There's no more divisional format. So when it's all said and done, you're going to have teams that are in both of those leagues ranked in the top 10 that aren't, playing for the conference championship or top 15. Nonetheless, these guys are going to have a seat at the table, and it would not surprise me. And it's going to happen as far as, the SEC and the Big Ten easily, okay, combining for 7 of the 12 spots. You look at Penn State over the last couple of years. The only thing that has hindered Penn State from getting to the college football playoff has been their struggles against both Ohio State and Michigan. The Nittany Lions have basically gone 10-2 every year for the most part. It just comes down to those games. Now, this makes it a little easier for a school like Penn State. You look at the SEC, all right? So much has been on the line in recent years when Alabama plays LSU late in the season. And of course, the loser, for the most part, misses out on getting the playoff. That's going to change. What about what we just saw from the SEC championship game, where the top ranked team in the country for the entire season, Georgia, lost in the SEC championship game to Alabama, and because of that, they're home. That's not going to happen anymore. And I think anybody who doesn't think that this playoff format is not going to be dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten together, then they're very naive on this subject. So, with that said, in my opinion, you've got the ACC, okay, and the Big 12. They're in this thing together with the group of five because they're going to be fighting for spots. Again, the top five ranked conference champions. So it's one of those where, you know what, you really got to peel back the surface and accept it for what it is. I mean, conference championship games are still going to be very important. And honestly, I think they're going to be more important than what they were in the past. And I say this because clearly, we've seen it for the longest time, even going back to the days of the BCS, where that SEC championship game became a de facto national semifinal because the winner moved on while the loser, of course, had to settle for a regular BCS bowl. This time around, those conference championship games are still going to be important because it comes down to possibly getting a bye in round number one. And I guarantee you, if we're talking about, the top two teams in the Big Ten facing off in Indianapolis in the championship game, the top two teams in the SEC facing off in Atlanta in the SEC championship game, I guarantee you that a first round bye is going to be on the line. So those conference championship games are still going to be important. And then for other leagues like the ACC, like the Big 12, like the Mountain West, and so forth, you might have a scenario where, guess what? You might be a one bid conference. So because of that, it could come down to that conference championship game winner, whereas the loser of that game would not have a shot at the college football playoff. So it's one of those, like I said, it's going to be dominated by the Big Ten. It's going to be dominated by the SEC. But with this new 12-team format, should there be more excitement or should there be disappointment? I'll tell you like this: if you're a fan of expansion, you're definitely going to be excited. If you're a purist, as far as you want to see how go back to the old days where, your New Year's Day bowl games meant a lot, or the days of the BCS and so forth, then you might not enjoy this because at the end of the day, the product, as exciting as it is, it's going to continue to get watered down. And the reason why, we just heard the reports today as well. There's already been a 14 team format discussed, and we haven't even gotten the 12-team format, off the ground. And I said this again last year when people were upset, as far as schools like Florida State and Georgia not getting into the college football playoff, and they had legit gripes. Well, I said, and I wasn't the only one on this, it wasn't going to stop at 12 because it hasn't stopped already. You go back 35, 40 years ago where, the Sugar Bowl, Rose Bowl, Orange Bowl, and so forth, all of these big bowls were played on the same day. And of course, the Big Ten had their tie ins with the Rose Bowl. Orange Bowl had their tie-ins with the likes of the Big Eight in those days, Sugar Bowl with the SEC and so forth. And you might have had multiple teams undefeated and, having to share a piece of the national championship. Well, okay, the BCS was supposed to solve all of that, and the BCS was not perfect, okay? But for the most part, the BCS more often than not did get it right. But of course, that wasn't good enough. Let's go to the 14 format. And I knew that expansion from the 14 playoff format was inevitable. Okay, but I figured maybe they might go to 5 teams, maybe six, as far as what, you have two campus games, and then those while the top two teams get a bye, or the top three teams get a bye, whatever, and then you go on to the bowl games. They've gone to another level, and we're going to 12. It's not going to stop there because the powers that be see how much money is involved, and if they feel like, and they know they can, okay, get more money from the next rounds of television deals for this playoff, they're going to do it. We've seen expansion all across the board in playoff formats. We've seen it in the NBA as far as what they can get now for the play-in tournament. We've seen it in the National Football League, being that they've added an additional game to the wild card round. We've seen it in Major League Baseball as well, and college football, is no different. And I think more often than not, more people need to get out of the idea of calling this amateur athletics, because it's not. Because pretty soon, I guarantee you, some of these guys that are playing football at these big universities, if they haven't already, they're going to start signing pro style contracts to play collegiate athletics. There's too much money going around between the NILs, between the transfer portals, and of course, all of the money that these schools and conferences are getting from their respective television deals, all of the money that's being floated around via the college football playoff. It is bound to happen. And at the end of the day, all of the powers that be, what they're doing, they're chasing the greenback. I'll tell you like this: there is going to be a feeling out process for this, but like I always say, there's going to be a 13th team and a 14th team this year that's going to be upset and say, you know what, we deserve the shot. And I guarantee you, once they go to 14 teams, there's going to be a 15th team and a 16th team. And before you know it, we're going to be at 16 teams. Why? Because this thing is going to keep growing. And like I also said, the gap between both the SEC and Big Ten and everybody else is going to continue to grow. Like I said last night, and like I have said multiple times, it's only a matter of time before we get to 20. Florida State's looking to get out of the ACC, okay? There's only two places for them to go. The SEC cannot afford to let the Big Ten open up shop in their backyard and take Florida State. And if you take Florida State, they're not leaving the ACC alone. They're probably going to take a North Carolina, a Miami, and a Clemson with them. That would push the SEC to 20, okay? And the Big Ten, I'll tell you like this: with what's going on right now, it would not surprise me sooner rather than later if Notre Dame gets upset, as far as feeling like somewhere down the line they deserve a first round bye, even though they agreed to this 5+7 model. Okay, I guarantee you the Big Ten wouldn't mind tapping them on the shoulders and saying, "Hey, let's talk turkey." But again, a lot of that factors into the television deal. The Big Ten last year could have had Stanford and Cal if they wanted to. And if things in the ACC go south with, power such as Florida State and Clemson looking to lead, I guarantee you, they're not going to be alone, and the ACC is probably going to try to hold on for survival as much as possible. But at the end of the day, there is going to be excitement from this new college football playoff format. It's going to be interesting to see how the seeding breaks down going forward. But you know what? This was inevitable. This thing is always going to change. And I say that because the SEC and Big Ten are going to continue to grow, unfortunately. I'm not a fan of it because it's just one of those where it's just, in my opinion, it's just continuing to, widen the gap, if you will, between the haves and the have-nots in the world of college football. And basically, it's going to get to the point soon that if you ain't in the SEC or the Big Ten, for that matter, you really won't have a shot at things. This is the nature of the beast. This beast that is college football continues to get bigger. How bigger and badder will it get? Only time is going to tell. But, folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now, you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.